Hello, welcome to Art in the Digital World. This week I have a very special guest, the station manager here at the public TV station. I have Ed Lark. Thank you very much for coming today, Ed.
Well, it was great to be here. I didn't have to travel very far.
Yes, you helped out with the last show, or kind of oversaw it, yeah.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what your position is here at the studio.
Oh my goodness, we don't have enough time, but anyway, it's basically to keep everything running smoothly. We have 2 channels that operate 24/7, and I do have a programmer who handles all of that work, and then I have to schedule other programs because we put on a lot of shows here in the studio every week, and then organizing them, all of the reservations and everything else. So that's just part of it, and we also get a lot of telephone calls coming in, and we do editing, and it's a little of everything to keep a studio operating.
You definitely do a lot of things. How did you get into doing the public TV station here? How did you kind of find this position? How did it find you?
It goes back many years. For over 40 years, I did documentary filming and traveled all over the world, shooting documentaries, also in this country, presenting programs. So I had a lot of experience in that area as far as filming, and I had done just about everything I wanted to do. And so at one point I thought, well, I think I'm going to retire from this. And after a couple of months of doing relatively little, I was climbing the walls, and so I said, I want to do something else. And it turned out that the county was looking for a manager for a TV station, and so I applied and they hired me. And so my whole experience, of course, from film to digital was interesting, and it was a learning experience. I had done some work prior to working here, about 2 or 3 years of digital work, but it was, in some respects, it's very different. In other respects, it's very much the same. And so I enjoyed doing that. I still enjoy it. I've been doing it now for 12 years here, and I hope to be around for many more years.
You will be, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's go way back. And tell me how you first got into doing film.
Oh my, this was just as a teenager. I loved films. Even when I was a little kid, I devoured photography magazines and catalogs with greater enthusiasm than comic books. And I just loved motion pictures, and it was a gradual evolution. I got my degree at Berkeley in engineering, but I also knew that getting into the motion picture business is very tenuous, and not many people succeed at it. So I thought I better have some sort of a backup. I worked for a couple of years as an engineer after I got out of college, just enough to earn enough to start my first film, which turned out to be in Sweden. And because I had lived there for a year as a teenager, and it just kind of gradually grew, and fortunately I had a wonderful mentor and also an agent who booked me, and it just grew from there.
What kind of films did you start off doing?
Well, my first film was over in Sweden because as I said, I had lived there for a year, and I wanted to have a particular topic that I knew well, and so I called it Sweden Year-Round, and I spoke the language. I also had a film with me from California that I called, when translated into Swedish, it was called Sunny California, because I knew that the Swedes have a great weakness for the sun. They love the sun. They get out and sunbathe anytime they can. And so I showed that around the country and presented it in the Swedish language, and did 85 shows in Sweden all over. And during that time, the year period, I could earn some money from that, but I also was able to produce a film that covered Sweden year-round. So we had a lot of different interesting topics, the Christmas time in Sweden, and also the church boat races and the ski races, and just so many different things that it was fun.
Did you know that you wanted to get into doing the documentative type stuff as opposed to doing sort of fictional storytelling?
Yes, yes, definitely. That and travel-oriented films. And so I just knew ahead of time what I liked, and as I like to be creative, I like people, I like to travel, and so I put everything together in one little package and said, well, what fits that? And it turned out to be this documentary filmmaking and travel filmmaking. So I was all over the world that way, and a lot of fun experiences. For example, you get into interesting situations. For example, when I was filming in Sweden, I was there during the springtime, of course, and the Baltic is all frozen over. And I wanted to get on an icebreaker to show how they come in and break up the ice. Well, the icebreakers in Sweden are run by the military, and I did have a good contact with the government, and they made arrangements for me to get on an icebreaker in northern Sweden. And when I got on, they also had a helicopter on board. And as we were going out, breaking a path for other ships, I got some wonderful shots. But the only thing is that the boat moves a fair amount, and I thought I'd like to be able to get a shot of the icebreaker going through the ice rather than from the boat. And so I asked the captain if we could make use of the helicopter, or I could get some aerials. And he said, sure. So we went down to the helicopter. The captain called the pilot to get the helicopter ready. And before getting in, I asked him if we could have the door open on my side, because otherwise there's a lot of reflection in the bubble, you know, the plastic bubble. So he took the whole door off, and I just sort of tightened my belt a little more. And we took off, and we got some wonderful shots of the icebreaker going along. But also, as you know, there's quite a bit of vibration in a helicopter, and I wasn't too sure, even though I was shooting at higher speed so that it would smoothen out any vibrations. So I asked if we could set down on the ice, and then ahead of the icebreaker, so I could get my camera and tripod out and get it on the ice and watch the icebreaker going by. And the pilot got permission from the captain to do that. So we flew about a mile ahead, settled down. I got out, and the way the sun was, it was casting a shadow right where I would want to be filming. So I had to get away from the helicopter for about 100 feet. And as I was walking away, I saw these sort of dark spots which indicated thin ice. So I kind of walked around them and set up my tripod and got the camera going just as the icebreaker was going by. And an icebreaker operates by its weight on the ice. And there's a very curved bow. And when the icebreaker comes up on the ice, it rises up on the ice and then crashes, and then rises up and crashes. And when it crashes down, of course, the ice splits in all directions. And as I was going along, or not I, but the icebreaker was going along, and all of a sudden I saw a crack propagating right at me. And it went right between my legs. And I have no idea why, because there were just miles. There was no horizon whatsoever. It was just nothing but ice from horizon to horizon. And I looked down, and water was coming up. And of course, the pilot knew what had happened, and he immediately revved up his helicopter to take the weight of the helicopter off the ice, and I literally grabbed my arm around the camera and tripod, ran for the helicopter. I got one leg on a skid, got another one on a strut there, and he took off. Now I'm trying to get my camera up into the helicopter first before I climb in, and I managed to do it, but it was a little exciting. I had my heart in my throat at that moment.
Did you look down at the ice break away just as you guys were taking off?
Fortunately, I didn't look. And so, but those are experiences that you have,
wow.
and things, and I could tell you many others too. But you were talking about art in the digital world. And
well, we'll get to the digital part, of course.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Well, I love to hear the experiences too, you know. So when you were doing these travel sort of films, and then now I understand you did some stuff for National Geographic, or
oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
How did that work?
Well, we would produce these films, and then they would be previewed by members of the National Geographic, and if it met their quality, then they would book you on their series there. And so that's, fortunately, I did 19 programs, feature-length films during my career, and they took all of them, and so that was pretty nice.
So you didn't actually produce them by National. They weren't produced by National Geographic. They were produced by you, but then they.
That's
would put
right.
It in their
Yeah,
oh, okay.
they would decide whether they wanted it on their series, and then they would, and so.
Now, speaking of, you know, we're going to talk about digital, but back before digital and TV, how did people see your films?
Oh, all over the country. We would book them, not we, but my agent would book them in auditoriums all over the country, including the National Geographic and Chicago Geographic, and San Francisco was called Explorama, and they had a whole series going there, some in the South Bay. They had about 900 different places in the country, including Canada, where they would present these programs. And we would go around with them and present them.
And so there was just one print for the film, and you would just show them there?
Well, usually you try, because it was expensive to make a print. And so you'd go out and, of course, when you film, you'd start with about anywhere from 12 to 15,000 feet of film. And then you had to cut that down to around 3,000. And that would be about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, around that range. And so it took a great deal of time editing. So you would go out filming for 2 to 3 months. You'd come back and work on the editing for another 3 months. And then you'd have to get it printed. You had the script and everything else, and the music and everything else you had to create. So you were somewhat of a one-man show. And when you'd go abroad, when I went abroad, I usually had one person with me. I would try to bring a member of the family because they work cheap. But there were times. What I would also do is, when I was there, I had always been in contact with a member of the government or tourist office or something of that country, and arrangements were made well ahead of time, because there's a lot of research that you have to do before you even go to the country. And you have to know the country very well. And every day that you're there, it costs you money. So you're trying to get all that you need to photograph, you know, as fast as possible. So it's not a vacation. There's a lot of hard work and long hours of shooting that you do every single day. But every day is different, and it's exciting, and you're meeting new people, and you're learning something new every day. So, for example, you never know. When I was doing a film on the Vikings, I was in Iceland, and I wanted to get a shot of a glacier there. And so I talked to the people and arranged to get on a snowmobile, and we just took off. I'd never been on a snowmobile before. And this guy he just went skimming along, and I had to try to keep up with him. And the unfortunate part about it is it bounced so much that it ruined one of my cameras. Unfortunately, I had another camera with me also, but those are things that you encounter when you're doing this, and it can be fun, it can be exhausting, but you always go to bed at night just feeling wonderful, and you're just excited to get up the next morning to continue it again.
And what kind of cameras did you use, and what kind of film did you shoot on?
Well, 16 millimeter. Everyone shoots documentaries and things on 16, and we most of the time worked with Bolexes because they're rugged, and the nice part about it is that you can have an electric motor on it, but if there's something goes wrong, your battery wears out or some other thing, or you got to shorten the cable, you can always go to a spring wind. So that's flexible in that respect, and it's a good documentary camera. Now, sometimes we've used an Aeroflex. A Beaulieu is very good for using for time-lapse work and things, but most of the time we worked with Bolexes.
Now, I know a little bit about this thing called film, but so when you would go shoot, you'd have to get it developed. But after you'd shoot, how long was it until you got to see your footage?
Oh, well, not until you get home, but what you always did is you worked with a lab, a major lab down in Hollywood, and you would talk to them and say, okay, I'm going to be sending you film periodically, process it, take a quick check of it, and see that everything is okay. And then if everything was okay with them, then I would have them send it to a colleague here at home who would actually view the footage to make sure that there were no hairs in the gate, or there's something else happened that I was unaware of. And he always had my telephone number where he could get in touch with me in the other country, so if anything went wrong, I'd know, because I'd always send the stuff back airmail, so that would get back here in 2-3 days. It would be processed. So by the end of the week, I would know whether everything was okay.
And how long were you gone on some of these
2 to
trips?
3 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's at least how long it takes to. You're lucky if you get through in 2 months, because then you've had good weather. But other times it's taken a good 3 months at least, and sometimes it can be very frustrating, especially if you're filming in the UK, where the weather is not all that good. If you're in the Middle East or something like that, or in other countries, well, when I was filming in Sri Lanka, there was generally very good weather, but hot and humid, and you had to keep the film in ice chests, and it was, because you had to take all your film with you, and so you'd have maybe 30, 40, 50 pounds of film, and you had to have some sort of ice chest. So when you got there, you'd usually buy some sort of ice chest and keep it in, keep ice on there. And otherwise, the film might deteriorate and change. The color balance would change, and you always want to be very consistent in that, because we always had the same emulsion number for all of the whole film, batch of film.
Now, this might be a negative subject to bring up, but I've heard sometimes people travel and do a lot of stuff like this get sick. They can get sick from the local food or whatever, Have you had any experience with that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it is true.
It is true. Yeah. Particularly when you go into those tropical countries, Taiwan, or any in Asia, and all those areas, they have totally different bugs than we have. Now, for example, in Europe, I like working in Europe because it's so easy, particularly in Northern Europe. There, things are very clean. Actually, the sanitary conditions are cleaner there than they are actually here in the States. They're very fussy, and they're very careful about the food and everything. I never had a bug in the Scandinavian countries, although I can't say that in, well, when I was in Sri Lanka, yeah, I had bugs. I got very sick 5 times, and there was one time. You always were very careful, and I had a driver, and he was wonderful, and we would go around to different places, and we'd stop at what they call these rest houses. They were very, very comfortable. They had their own bathrooms and everything like that, but they didn't always understand sanitation. And there was one time when we got to this one place, we got there to just have the night, and we wanted some lemonade, but they have limeade. It's wonderful limes that they've got. And I would always ask the person, now, did you boil the water? Oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. Okay, that's fine. And I'm drinking this. And as I'm drinking it, they're big glasses. Sometimes I would order 2 or 3 of these because it's so hot. And as my eyes kind of looked down at the ice cubes in the glass. And so when he came back, I said, by the way, what about the water for the ice? Did you boil that? Oh, no, why would you do that? Well, I got sick. Oh, yeah, and so you do have to be careful in those places. But in Germany, Northern Europe, Holland, the Scandinavian countries and things, they're all very health conscious. They're very sanitary. You can drink the water. You don't have to worry.
So when did you kind of stop doing these these films?
Well, that was about 13 years ago when I decided to retire from producing documentaries and things. I spent much of my life on the road, and while it was exciting, you didn't spend much time home, and there were times when I would be away for 6 months, sometimes up to 9 months at a time, and it would be in and out. But I mean, that you're going so much, and you're living in motels or hotels, and after a while, you say, I've done it all. I've seen the world. I've done it all. I've had a wonderful experience in life. Now it's time to settle down. And that's what I decided when I was a young person, because I would see these men who are waiting to retire, and they retired, and 2 years, 3 years later, they're dead. And I'm saying to myself, is that the reward that you get for keeping your nose to the grindstone all of your life? I said, I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to go out and have fun. I'm going to travel. And then when I'm ready to retire, I'll stay home. And the only trouble is I couldn't stay home. I enjoy what I'm doing now.
Well, at least you're in a small part of the world that you're traveling instead of all over the world.
Right.
Now, did you have, when you finished, did you have any experiences with video yet? Was that around, or were you still doing 16 all the way up to?
No, well, when I finished, no, the video was there, and is there. And I had done some films. I did a promotional film for the state park, Calaveras State Park, and that was my first experience with video. And it was kind of a shocker because I was used to shooting my subjects in a way that I would shoot film. And the type of film that I worked with had a wonderful latitude, meaning that it would pick up details in the shade and also in the highlights. And when I started working with video, I didn't realize that video does not have the same latitude that film has. And so I went out, started shooting out in the woods there, and it was awful. It looked terrible. And the first day I couldn't use a footage of video that I shot. And then I realized, you know, what I had to do. I had to wait until we had overcast days or when it was drizzly. And then I got some gorgeous footage because the digital would actually increase the contrast of the picture so that it looked normal. Now, if you shot it with film that way, it would be pretty flat looking, but with digital, it makes it look real nice. And so that was an interesting experience.
Well, how would you describe your experience with working with digital as far as the post-production and all that other stuff, you know, other than just the look of the footage?
Oh, there's a huge difference in post-production. Very briefly, when you're doing the production, it's basically the same as shooting with film. I mean, it's the way you're composing the picture and the sequencing, and you've got to keep in mind how everything is being shot and how you're going to put it together in your mind. But in post-production, it's so different. With film, and I won't go into too much detail because it's it's very lengthy. But you get your film, it's negative, and then you get what's called a work print. Then you take this 12 to 15,000 feet of work print and start running it through your viewer to decide what clips you want, and then you've got to hang those clips on a special rack, and you tie them all together. And once you get your work print all put together the way you want it, this hour-and-a-half film, then you have to go back to the original footage and pull those same scenes and put them together. It's called conforming. And so you match the original footage with the work print that you put together. After you get that all put together, you figure your dissolves and everything else. You have to do it in your cutting. You take it to the lab, and you have an A roll, a B roll, sometimes it may be a C roll, and then you have your audio tracks and everything else that you have to create and get it off to the lab, and then they make a print, and that's called a trial print. And they bring it back to you, you look at it, you run it through, and you're going to find out that it'll need some changes. So you tell the printer down there what needs to be done, and they redo it, and that's the way it works. With digital, you just take it, bring the original footage into an editing bay. We have nonlinear digital editing, and I mean, it's a piece of cake compared to film.
Yeah, I had a little experience in school doing film, and it definitely is a lot better. Well, you're not going to believe this, Ed, but we're almost out of time.
Holy smoke, and I just began.
I know. But, you know, I think that it was really great to talk to you about the experience of what it was like to shoot with film. Like you saying, you know, it could take up to a week to see your footage, whereas with video, you could watch it that night. And,
that's right.
And see if it was good, and then go in and redo it the next day. So.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, thank you very much. Maybe we'll have to do another show with you, you know, if I can get you on camera. So.
Well, you have to twist my leg a little bit.
Yeah. So, well, thank you very much. And Ed, I really appreciate you letting me as a volunteer be here and to do this great show. And I know all the volunteers really appreciate a lot of the stuff that you've done. So you've really made the studio a wonderful place for people to come and do projects and do video. And your experience is definitely, I'm sure, helped a lot of people. So I just wanted to say that to you.
Well, thanks so much. But you're a great asset to the studio.
So thank you, too. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching Art in the Digital World, and have a great day.